Scarlet Nexus was a game that I really wanted to love. It's got a gorgeous art style, with some interesting characters, and at times a truly outstanding combat system. Unfortunately, I don't think I've seen many games that shoot themselves in the foot as much as this game does. Scarlet Nexus makes one crucial mistake in its core formula, resulting in an omnipresent issue that remains frustrating throughout the entirety of the game. And that issue is enemy design. Before we get into the specifics as to why this is such a major problem, we're going to talk about how fun the combat is discounting the enemies. Basically, there are two campaigns here. You choose whether to play as Yuito or Kasane. Whilst the game doesn't change drastically depending on this choice, they do have unique abilities and they don't spend the entire game together, so there are arguments to play both of them. I chose to play as Kasane on my initial playthrough, and the main ability here is Psychokinesis. You can just launch stuff at your enemies, and that is of course always fun. There's definitely a power trip element going on here, and it's very fun to engage with. Alongside this, the game gradually introduces new abilities to you at perfectly spaced intervals, and they are absolutely fun. Genuinely, you always feel like you have options at your disposal in terms of taking out regular enemies. At the end of the game, you just have so many abilities. You have different weapon wheels, or ability wheels I suppose. It's great, you've got a lot of choices. There's a giant skill tree that allows you to upgrade your party as you see fit. As you can tell by what I'm saying, this all sounds great. They really do have the bones of greatness here. But then, they ruined it, because the enemy design just absolutely does not complement the awesome abilities that you have. They are far too restrictive. A lot of the time, one of your abilities will be the only way to take out a certain enemy. I don't mean the most effective, I mean the only way. Like an enemy that is invisible and you can't see it unless you use the ability to bring it into the real world. Something as dumb as that. This means that you don't want to use this ability for anything else, as if it's on cooldown when this specific enemy appears, then you can't really do anything until the cooldown expires. They've handed you a plethora of abilities to have fun with, but then restrict how you could best use them. We only need to look at a 2023 release to see a much better way of doing this. Final Fantasy XVI gives you a bunch of abilities. Some are best used against certain enemies, but you can still use others on them if the most effective ability is currently on cooldown. Scarlet Nexus just feels like a game that should have put freedom and creativity at the forefront of its ethos, but it instead decided to restrict you, and it doesn't really make much sense. They also reuse quite a lot of bosses, which isn't unheard of in JRPGs or anything. Hell, a lot of games in general do this. But it is a shame, because the unique bosses are really cool. I wish they'd showcase that talent more than relying on repeated fights. But this game's biggest demon is by far its terrible enemy design, given how much they don't mesh with the fluid feeling provided by the combat. And this is mind-numbingly annoying, because this game actually has so much going for it. The world is visually stunning. I'm a big fan of this art style, and I know a lot of people think that this kind of art style looks a bit generic, but I don't know, I liked it, screw you. And some of the locations also look great. There's also a fair amount of variety in terms of areas, although there is a decent amount of backtracking. The soundtrack is immaculate. The music always sets the correct tone, with calming tracks in calm moments and chaotic ones in chaotic moments. This may sound simple and like the bare minimum, but it's still done well. Not all games do this. The cast isn't overly interesting or memorable on their own, but the way you interact with them gives them a lot more depth. You can spend time with them in between missions to improve your bond level, similarly to quite a few games like Yakuza Like a Dragon for example. Once you increase your bond level, they become more useful in combat. This ensures the natural progression of the group's relationship transitions into gameplay, which is a very nice touch. The story was pretty cool, but if I'm being completely honest, it's not one that's really going to stick with me. I'm glad I experienced it, and I appreciated Kasane and Yuito especially, but nothing else really stood out to me. It does have some interesting twists and set pieces though. It's enjoyable, it's just not exceptional. So with all this in mind, it's so annoying that they messed up the enemy design. Scarlet Nexus had so much going for it. It was a game that I did honestly thoroughly enjoy and could still recommend to a lot of people. But as fun as the combat could have been, Scarlet Nexus willingly chose to disrupt its own flow, and ultimately shot itself clean in the foot. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. I hope that you did enjoy. If you did, then please consider leaving a like, so that would greatly help me out. And if you want to see more videos from me, then you could always consider subscribing. But that's all for now. Have a nice day, and goodbye.
It's working. Focus on that spot.
Useless. Check.